We have a verdict in the case of the people versus DJ. Donald John Trump is guilty of 34 felony charges.
Guilty, guilty, and guilty again. These headlines are peppered throughout the media, and we couldn't be happier. Jimmy Kimmel went after Trump like a bug. He literally squashed him on one episode of his show, and it was brilliant.
Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree.
You're a criminal, Donald. That's what the jury said.
A jury in New York found former U.S. President Donald Trump liable on Thursday for tampering with Trump Organization financial documents while paying money to former porn actress Stormy Daniels. Trump was found guilty on all 34 charges. He became the first former president in U.S. history to be found guilty of a crime by a jury. The jury, which had been watching the sides debate for more than a month, began deliberating on the 29th of May. In total, their deliberations lasted about 11 hours. The jury, consisting of 7 men and 5 women, had to reach a unanimous decision on each count. Judge Juan Merchan announced that sentencing is scheduled for the 11th of July. It will thus take place 4 days before the Republican Party's National Convention, which will be held from the 18th of July in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There, Trump must be officially approved as a candidate for the U.S. Republican presidential nomination. According to the rules of American legal procedure, the accused had to stay in the courthouse all the time while the jury was deliberating. After the verdict was announced, Trump reiterated his innocence and called the verdict a disgrace. The reason for the investigation against the former U.S. president was the publication of the Wall Street Journal in January 2018. According to its data, a month before the Republican won the presidential election in 2016, his lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid Daniels $130,000 so that she did not spread information about the connection with Trump about 10 years ago.
Poor Donald Trump, 7 weeks of sleep farting, all down the drain, all for nothing. You do have to hand it to him. No president has ever been convicted more than Donald Trump.
Jimmy's right. So much wasted time. It was clear from the start that he was hopeless and would lose this case. But the judge's verdict will be announced on the 11th, and we'll be looking forward to seeing Trump put behind bars. Ahead is the judge's decision on whether or not to send Trump to jail. That's the twist of the case now. The fact that Trump has been found guilty is a legal fact, and now only on the will of the judge depends on what punishment he will be given. And this will be known on the 11th of July. On that day, Judge Juan Merchan has scheduled Trump's sentencing. At this point, the former president will remain at large pending sentencing. He's running for president, and nothing will change from this judgment. People in our country need him because, frankly, that's more important than anything other people think. Our people are speaking out clearly, they're making donations, however modest, and they're stepping up because they're afraid, because we can't let something like this happen to us, the lawyer said. Trump himself said he was fine with the prospect of serving jail time or being under house arrest. I don't think the public will stand for it. I'm not sure the public would support that. I think the public will have a hard time accepting, there's going to be a tipping point at some point, the old fart suggested. It will be a rout if our president rules the country sitting at home or in jail. He will not be able to pardon himself if he wins the election. That right is held by the governor of the state where the case is filed. The current prosecution was tried in a New York court, a state headed by Democrat Kathy Hochul, who praised the guilty plea. Today's verdict confirms that no one is above the law. The other case is before the court in Florida, whose governor is now Ron DeSantis. He ran against Trump in the Republican primary. In theory, Trump could be stripped of his powers under the 25th Amendment, which mandates that they be transferred to the vice president if the head of state is unable to exercise the powers and duties of his office. This would require the consent of the vice president and a majority of cabinet members, who, however, would be appointed by Trump himself. But none of this will happen, and there's no need to freak out unnecessarily.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace.
In recent months, Donald Trump has actively used his public appearances and social media to accuse judges of corruption and bias. His rhetoric is aimed at discrediting the judiciary and undermining trust in justice. Trump claims that the judges hearing his cases are allegedly bribed and acting out of political motives rather than in the interest of justice. However, he ignores a key fact. He was found guilty by a jury, not judges. The recent decision by a jury of ordinary citizens was made after careful consideration of the evidence and arguments of both sides. This emphasizes the objectivity and independence of the verdict. Nevertheless, Trump continues to question the integrity of the trial, claiming that the entire process is rigged and unfair. Such tactics by Trump have far-reaching consequences. His statements undermine public confidence in the judicial system and create a climate of distrust and polarization in society. This is particularly dangerous in a context of political tension, where stability and faith in the fairness of institutions are critical. Meanwhile, despite his attempts to discredit the court, the fact remains that he was found guilty on the basis of the evidence presented and the jury's decision. By continuing to ignore this aspect, Trump is attempting to shift the focus from his own misdeeds to the alleged problems of the judicial system. This strategy may be successful in the short term, but in the long term, it only deepens divisions in society and undermines the rule of law.
I have bad news. The only thing you're going to be fighting to win is the Jell-O cup on your prison cafeteria tray. 34 felony charges. That's 34. That's 34. That's 34, folks.
In light of all these circumstances, it is becoming increasingly clear that Donald Trump will never be president again. His constant attempts to discredit the judicial system and evade accountability only undermine his own reputation and diminish his chances for a political future. Each new attack on judges and juries demonstrates his inability to admit his own mistakes and accept the consequences of his actions. Public confidence in Trump is plummeting. Many of his supporters are beginning to realize that his endless accusations and attacks on justice have no real basis, but serve only to divert attention from his own misdeeds. In a democratic society where the rule of law and justice play a key role, such actions inevitably lead to political isolation and loss of support. With all the legal challenges he faces and the many lawsuits he is embroiled in, the prospect of Trump returning to the White House is becoming increasingly unrealistic. His political opponents are using his every mistake to bolster their positions, and his former allies are beginning to distance themselves, realizing that his toxic rhetoric and destructive actions are damaging to the party and the country. Thus, all of Trump's attempts to return to the presidency are futile. His insistence on blaming others and shirking responsibility will only increase his isolation and destroy what remains of his credibility. History has already delivered its verdict. Donald Trump, with his utter contempt for justice and his inability to accept his own mistakes, will never again be President of the United States.
The criminal trial, the People versus Donald Julianne Trump, is about to come to a close. The prosecutors concluded their case today. The defense is expected to rest tomorrow. And I have to say, I don't think a defense has ever been more well-rested than this one.
The Jimmy Kimmel Show has become quite the circus lately, as he happily takes on Donald Trump versus Stormy Daniels. And believe me, the comedic potential is off the charts here. Every night, Jimmy takes the stage and starts his show with something like this: "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we have on our agenda the biggest lawsuits seen only in Hollywood films. Yes, I'm talking about Donald Trump and his adventures with Stormy Daniels. Who would have thought that a man whose hair looks like cotton candy would be in such a sweet scandal?" He continues, pausing for dramatic effect. Here's an idea: Donald Trump versus Stormy Daniels. If someone had said that to me about 5 years ago, I would have thought it was the title of a new comedy on Netflix. But no, this is real life. Thank you, America, for making my show more interesting. Jimmy then usually pulls out some sort of prop from backstage, such as a toy court gavel. "I even made a special gavel for this case," he says. True, it's a little smaller than the one they use in court, but, you know, With the way Trump is going, I think they could use one of those. Kimmel doesn't forget to laugh at the absurdity of the whole situation. Imagine Trump trying to explain that nothing happened, and Stormy's like, "Of course, Donald, nothing happened, just like you've never had fake news." And so, memes and videos pop up on the screen behind Jimmy as Trump tries to wriggle out of yet another question. "Watch him try to dodge," Kimmel laughs. He reminds me more of me when I was at school trying to explain to my mom why my A in maths suddenly turned into a D. "Yeah, Donald, we believe you." But the climax of the evening comes when Jimmy decides to present his version of the trial. What if I was the judge in this case? Courtroom scene. Donald at one end, Stormy at the other. I'm in the center with this gavel and I say, "Silence in the courtroom. Donald, tell us your side of the story." No, not the one you've already told on Twitter. The real one. And that's when it gets interesting. Trump has verbal diarrhea, panicking as he recalls all his tweets, jumbled stories, and random excuses. At the end, Jimmy takes a deep breath and concludes, "Well, dear viewers, this trial could go on forever. But one thing I know for sure is that no screenwriter in Hollywood could have come up with a comedic story like this. Thank you, Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels, for making our evening so entertaining." And the audience erupts in applause and laughter. After all, only Jimmy Kimmel can turn a trial into a real show full of humor and satire.
Costello was an advisor to Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen. Trump's lawyers, they've been working to paint Michael Cohen as a sleazy liar who's hell-bent on revenge, while conveniently leaving out the fact that Trump used him as his own personal porno Venmo. And
the completion of the testimony of Michael Cohen left the prosecution of Donald Trump, like its star witness, in tatters. In the final day of cross-examination, Cohen admitted to committing larceny in stealing tens of thousands of dollars from his client. Even more notably, he admitted to the larceny on the stand. After the statute of limitations had passed, there will be no dead felony zapped back into life against Cohen, as it was for Trump. Cohen clearly has found a home for his unique skill as a convicted, disbarred serial perjurer. It was not the first time that prosecutors looked the other way, as Cohen admitted to major criminal conduct. In a prior hearing, Cohen admitted under oath that he lied in a previous case where he pleaded guilty to lying. If that is a bit confusing, it was just another day in the life of Michael Cohen, who appears only willing to tell to the truth if he has no other alternative. The result is truly otherworldly. You have a disbarred lawyer not only casually discussing lies and uncharged crimes, but prosecutors who proceeded to get him to remind the jury that he is not facing any further criminal charges. If any one of those jurors had stolen tens of thousands of dollars, they would be given a fast trip to the Huskow. Yet Cohen then matter-of-factly said he plans to run for Congress due to his name recognition, the ultimate proof that it does not matter whether you are famous or infamous, so long as they spell your name right. As a legislator, Cohen would have the unique ability to say he will not be corrupted by Congress, because he came to Congress corrupted. While most members wait to take office to commit felonies, Representative Cohen would show up with a self-affirming criminal record. He could then take one of the few oaths that he has not previously violated as the Honorable Representative Michael Cohen. At the end of the day, Cohen is the ultimate shining object for prosecutors to use as a distraction from the glaring omissions in their case. Prior witnesses testified that Trump's payments to Cohen were designated as legal expenses, not by Trump, but by his accounting staff. Moreover, Cohen admitted that he worked for Trump for years in his murky capacity as a fixer. References to payments as a retainer were approved by Alan Weisselberg, a retired executive with the Trump Organization. The legal expense label was a natural characterization for a lawyer who was paid monthly and was on call as Trump's personal counsel. In any other district, this case would never have been allowed to go to trial. It certainly now should be facing a directed verdict by the court. Indeed, with any other defendant, a New York jury would be giving a Bronx cheer in derision. Even CNN hosts and experts have admitted that this case would never have been brought against another defendant or in another district. That is what Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is counting on. The biggest problem facing the defense is not the evidence, but the judge. Judge Juan Merchan seems to be channeling George Patton's warning, "May God have mercy upon my enemies, because I won't."
Cohen was on the stand for 4 days testifying against Trump. Among his many revelations was that one of his duties for the family was consulting on Melania Trump's Madame Tussauds wax museum negotiation. You know, they build those. This is not a joke, by the way.
So, imagine that in the courtroom across from Donald Trump sits none other than his former personal lawyer and perhaps most loyal associate, Michael Cohen. The atmosphere is tense, like a thriller film. The judge waves the gavel, calling for order, and Cohen, with the look of a man who knows all the darkest secrets, is ready to begin his presentation. Jimmy Kimmel couldn't miss the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, just imagine Michael Cohen. The man who once knew Trump's every move is now against him. It's like if Batman suddenly started suing Robin. Kimmel continues. Cohen goes to the podium, straightens up, and says with a serious look, "Your Honor, I know what Trump would say in this situation." And everyone in the audience holds their breath. He would say, "It's all fake, a big conspiracy against me. But this time, Your Honor, it's me against him, and I know every trick he's got." The courtroom audience, as well as the show's viewers, burst into laughter. Jimmy doesn't stop. So, imagine Trump sitting there, rubbing his hands together nervously as Cohen starts laying out all the secrets he once confided to his lawyer. It's like watching the most confusing episode of Friends, where everyone suddenly learns that Roz has been in love with Rachel all these years, but with much higher stakes.
And then we have brother Eric, who took his "look at me, Dad, please look at me" act to Hannity.
They have charged my father with 34 felony counts. It's been what they've been doing to my father since he came down that escalator. I've been by my father's side almost the entire time. My father's been censored. My father, that man right there on the stage, my father didn't do a damn thing wrong. He's a great president. He's a great person. He's a great father.
And in case I didn't mention it 5 times already, he's my father.
Jimmy Kimmel has once again trashed Trump and his family. They are trying to justify their lying family member who is corrupt to the core. Eric Trump made a wild claim about his father, Donald Trump, as he railed against New York after last week's landmark ruling in the fraud case against his family. "My father built the skyline of New York City, and this is the thanks he gets," he said on Fox News on Friday evening, hours after a judge ordered the former president to pay $355 million. Eric Trump and his brother, Donald Trump Jr., were each ordered to pay $4 million in the case, and all three are also facing other sanctions. They've vowed to appeal. Angry Eric Trump, "My father built the skyline of New York City, and this is the thanks he gets." Donald Trump owns or manages several buildings on the New York City skyline. Some, such as Trump Tower, were built for him. Others were built previously by other owners, with Trump later acquiring some share of ownership or interest. In other cases, Trump's company might manage properties, but did not build and does not own the buildings. Curbed has a look at his real estate portfolio in New York. Even including all of those properties, the buildings do not add up to a large portion of the skyline. Nor do they include its most distinctive features, as the former president's critics were quick to point out on X. This is funny for 2 reasons. 1, Trump in no way built the skyline of New York City, and 2, the suggestion that Trump conducted any business, anywhere, at any time, for any reasons other than selfishness or economic self-interest. Like he deserves NYC's gratitude? Jimmy is surprised at how deceitful people can be to try to justify his thief and rapist father for so long. The youngest son of the former president has long been unwilling to see his father, unlike the eldest.
Trump or his team, someone shared this video on Truth Social last night.
What happens after Donald Trump wins? What's next for America?
Okay, if you zoom in, you can see they slipped in the words "a unified Reich."
As the geniuses say, it's in the little things that all the mystery lies. Jimmy's focus on this is not in vain, because Trump's post-victory plans are truly horrific. Former U.S. leader Donald Trump has said he will close the U.S. southern border and stop the flow of migrants from Mexico after winning the upcoming presidential election. On the first day of my new administration, I will seal the southern border, put an end to this invasion, Trump said at a rally in the state of New Jersey, where 100,000 people gathered, according to U.S. press estimates. The politician also promised to send the illegals, whom he called allies of U.S. President Joe Biden, home where they belong. A dubious idea, just like his building a wall on the border. He poured a huge amount of money into an empty fence that migrants ended up walking through. To me, his plan is doomed. Trump may make many unexpected and even sensational statements, such as that he will allow Russia to attack a NATO member state that does not pay enough for the alliance's defense. Trump's recent comments about Russia and NATO also drew a rebuke from alliance chief Jens Stoltenberg, who said it could jeopardize the lives of U.S. and European soldiers, but expressed doubt that the U.S. would leave the bloc. But there are some of the campaign promises that Trump has repeated most often during the campaign.
NATO was busted until I came along. I said, everybody's going to pay. They said, well, if we don't pay, are you still going to protect us? I said, absolutely not. They couldn't believe the answer. And everybody, you never saw more money pour in to Secretary General Stoltenberg. Well, I don't know if he is anymore, but he was my biggest fan. He said, all these presidents came in, they'd make a speech, they'd leave, and that was it.
How a former president has proposed a tough approach to international relations, floating the idea of a universal 10% tax on all goods coming from countries outside the U.S. in an attempt to prioritize domestic production. The biggest fear in Brussels is that Trump will significantly reduce the volume of EU-U.S. trade relations. The European Union is working on a formal assessment of what a Donald Trump presidency would look like, and planning how to respond to any punitive trade measures that could hit the bloc if he wins the U.S. election. Brussels notes that the former U.S. president's rhetoric towards the European Union has become increasingly aggressive. As far as I am concerned, this man will destroy all our alliances around the world, and now we will be a closed country ruled by an embittered dictator.
What else does this man have to do for people to see what he is? Just grow the mustache? What if he grew the mustache? What if he grew a little blonde Hitler mustache, started strutting around with his arm out straight? You think it would have any effect? How many of his supporters do you think would say, all right, that's too much for me? I guess maybe 10.
Trump's supporters certainly deserve separate attention. Their loyalty is off the charts because in 2021 and now, they keep knocking on an empty door. What they don't realize is that they are doing more and more stupid things every day. Donald Trump's second term as president raises serious concerns about the future of the United States. Despite his promises to make America great again, his previous term demonstrated a number of problems that would only be exacerbated if he were reelected. Firstly, Trump has established himself as a politician who divides society rather than unites it. His rhetoric often sows discord and hatred, leading to increased internal conflict and polarization. This not only hinders constructive dialogue, but also weakens democratic institutions, creating the ground for political instability. Second, its approach to foreign policy has shown inconsistency and unpredictability. In an era of global challenges such as climate change and international conflicts, the U.S. needs stable and prudent leadership. However, Trump has repeatedly undermined the trust of allies and increased tensions with adversaries, which could lead to further deterioration of international relations. Third, his economic policies, despite short-term successes, have left behind significant problems. Rising public debt, income inequality, and weak social support could worsen if Trump retakes the presidency. His favoring the interests of large corporations over the needs of the middle class and poor threatens the long-term stability of the country's economy. Finally, it is worth remembering his repeated attempts to undermine the credibility of the electoral system and the media. These actions jeopardize the foundations of American democracy by undermining citizens' faith in the fairness and legitimacy of the electoral process. Thus, the re-election of Donald Trump could lead to an intensification of the internal and external challenges facing the U.S. The country needs leadership that can unite the people and lead them to prosperity, rather than creating new conflicts and divisions. What do you think about all this? Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to watch other shocking news on the channel.